Hi, I'm Chitra.
I'm Madhvi.
I am Jyoti.
I'm Padmaja.
Together, we are your hosts
On the Edge podcast.
We bring you stories and experiences.
From our experiments around learning, marketing, and design.
These are stories of people, technology,
And people interacting through technology.
Of what we see, create,
And recommend.
Hi, Vismaya, Janvi, Ria, and Abhiram. A very warm welcome to the four of you to the Edge podcast. I am very excited and looking forward to this conversation. It's, I think, going to be an interesting one. So thank you very much and a warm welcome to the Edge podcast to all of you.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you for having us. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chitra.
Thank you.
Usually on a podcast where we have guests, we ask them to introduce yourselves. Abhiram, why don't we start with you? How would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm Abhiram Joyce. I'm currently a third year human centered design at Srishti Manipal Institute of Design Technology. I'm currently associated with an organization called Design Beku, and I'm working there as a designer.
Thanks, Abhiram. Ria, how about you?
I'm Riya Mittal. Same as Abhiram, I'm in a third year of college. I'm pursuing human-centered design. Currently, I am interested in UI, UX, and product design, and also I am interested in research. So I'm interning as a research designer under a professor in the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and I'm working on behavioral design.
Nice, Ria. Thank you. Over to you, Janvi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janvi Goel. I'm a third year BSSD student. BSSD is Business Services and System Design from SMI. I am pursuing service design mainly, which is towards the consultation side. I'm an aspiring service designer, basically, who's wanting to enter the consultation field.
I'm sure that'll be very interesting, Janvi. How about you,
Yeah.
Vismaya?
I'm Vismaya. I study at Srishti Manipal Institute and I'm currently pursuing human-centered design. I'm interested in the field of service design and UI UX, but I'm still keeping my options open.
Thank you, Vismaya. What I'm seeing is we have a very diverse set of people here with very different interests and in the field of design itself, aspiring towards doing many, many different things. If I were to ask you all about your origin stories in terms of how did you get to choose to do a degree in design? Where did that happen? How did that happen? Why don't we start with Janvi this time?
In my 11th and 12th, I am a PCM student. So physics, chemistry, maths was my main subjects. I wanted to pursue engineering before, so I was kind of getting trained in that. My father was also very supportive of this decision, obviously. After that, I kind of deviated towards design. I became interested in interior design, and then I started looking at architecture. So there was a lot of things happening in my 11th and 12th. But then I kind of went ahead with the design option because I went for coaching for design, which wasn't really something that was very common in that time, 4 years ago. I stumbled upon Srishti and I learned about their multidisciplinary courses. So business services and system design was not really a topic that was offered in many institutes. It really intrigued me, and I spoke to my father, I spoke to my counselor about it, and we realized that I had a lot of potential in this field, and hence I went ahead with service design.
So can you talk us through a little bit of what this service design is and what is it about it that caught your eye or caught your attention, Janvi?
Everyone knows about product design, which is you creating a product. You create a bottle, for example, that you take it as a product. Service design looks at the services that a company offers, and not just what the company offers, but what goes behind what the company is doing. So if a company is manufacturing bottles, what are the different processes? What are the different stakeholders involved? How do you supply this bottle? How do you distribute the bottle? How do you procure the raw materials, for example? All of these include the service design aspect into it. Now, people mostly confuse it with an MBA degree or a BBA degree, for example, but it's not really that because you're looking through a perspective of design here. So, service design is where if I have to look at how the bottle will be distributed from a company to a distributor chain. So you look at variable options and viable options, and you speak to different stakeholders and you try to work with all of the stakeholders.
Thanks, Janvi. We'll come back to that. Probably, Ria, can you walk us through your decision to take design?
So I had been preparing to become a doctor for a really long time. I had taken an integrated course with like PCMB. So I was going to be giving the engineering exams as well as the NEET exams. But when COVID hit and like a lot of the entrance exams got delayed, I got very frustrated with the fact that I would have to study more, which sort of gave me an indication that even though I liked science, career as a career option, picking engineering or being a doctor was not maybe suitable for me. My decision to become a designer was very quick, very opposite to my decision of becoming a doctor. 2 weeks before Srishti's entrance exams closed, I found out about design as a career option. I went through everything and I looked at human centered design and IADP, which is industrial design. That's another course offered by Srishti, and I really liked what entailed within that. And 2 days before the registration closed, I applied with like my few sketches and everything as portfolio. So I think for me, it was a very fast decision. For now, that's what I can explain about my process.
That's an interesting journey as well. In fact, I hope at some point in time, who knows, your first interest may intersect with what may become your profession very soon. And who knows, you'll be designing a lot of medical equipment because it's happening in a big way in multiple dimensions, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually recently showed my portfolio to someone and they said that I had a niche for like a lot of medical and healthcare related products. So I tend to go there with a lot of my work. And in fact, one thing is also that even after design, like my parents weren't quite sure, and neither was I. I mean, I knew about it for 2 weeks. So I actually was still preparing a little bit for NEET. And then I also continued to give my competitive exams while I was still studying in Srishti. I'm still very interested in the science field and I try to like collaborate the science part and my liking for science with the design work that I do.
Sounds very interesting and exploratory. And I really hope you get to, find that sweet spot that brings you to a confluence of all these things. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ria. Abhiram, what led you to getting a degree in design?
During my high school, I was basically very actively doing theater and acting and drama. So I wanted to actually get into a field that would help me in theater or writing, especially. In my 11th and 12th, I wanted to do art, but my parents never let me do arts. They said if you want to do arts, you need to get at least 99% in your board exam, and I got 97. So I lost arts by 2% from my mother's standards. So I went into science in my PU. I did PCMC. Throughout my PU, I never saw myself as someone who would go into a engineering or a science discipline, and I had a very closed mindset at that time. But surprisingly, my faculty and my teacher in 11th and 12th who taught me computer science, she was very good at creating an interest for me in programming and in coding and things like that. And that's when I started realizing that, oh, maybe I have a slight inclination and a bent of mind towards science and engineering as well. And that's when I started getting more confused because I always thought I was an artistic person. But then at this stage, I realized I could relate to the other side as well. I initially started preparing for engineering because that is the safe path that everyone sort of tends to. But I was not fully convinced with it. So I was looking for an option that could let me explore and integrate a lot of multidisciplinary activities and let me explore a lot of things throughout my degree. And that's how I got into design. Design deals very equally in the artistic space and in the science space as well. So I wanted to be able to do theater and drama, and I also wanted to be able to do programming and coding and all of that. particularly while I was talking to people, people told me that Srishti promotes a lot of multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary design. So that was something that got me more curious. And further, human centered design seemed like an even more apt fit because I was always interested in human behavior and observing people and understanding stories and all of that. So it all seemed to come together really well, and it's been going well as well.
Thanks, Abhiram. Again, a whole lot of questions coming up there, and I hope we can explore a lot of them in this conversation. Vismaya, over to you. What made you choose design as your degree?
I was pretty clear since my childhood that I wanted to work in the field of art and design. And my parents were very supportive of it. And in fact, I've wanted to come to Srishti since I was in fourth grade. But I think in between, I gained a really strong liking for physics. I wanted to try and pursue astrophysics, but then I realized that I did not have an affinity for mathematics. So that dream died down real fast. But my dream of studying design was still on. In 11th and 12th, since I pursued arts with psychology, I gained a new interest in studying human behavior, how they respond to certain stimuli. When I started exploring the options in Srishti in more detail, I realized that human-centered design helped me explore psychology through the lens of design. That's why I decided to pursue human-centered design at Srishti. So far, I have gotten opportunities to explore the human psyche, but there's a lot more I would like to explore.
Cool. And I really hope you get that opportunity. Thanks to all of your stories, there's been a lot of questions brewing in my mind. And I want to see if I can seed something that the four of y'all can look at together and explore a particular topic. You've come from very different aspirations, from wanting to be an engineer to wanting to be a doctor to wanting to pursue theater and then psychology and astrophysics. I think at least two of you alluded to stories and human behavior. For me, it's always been fascinating that, so many of our historical buildings or paintings, a lot of it has been reflective of a certain kind of behavior or a culture of a society. Have you come across any instances of how you learned to use these capabilities of observation and look at people's behavior and probably incorporate them into something that you were doing? So basically, what have been your experiences so far in trying to build something or make something that is going to be consumed by somebody or used by somebody? What are the challenges that you've come across while doing it? How did that leave you while you were building or creating that product?
In terms of challenges specifically while designing something that could be consumed, the main challenge that I felt was, like, we've had a discussion about this before on how the problem space or thinking in terms of what the problem is a very uncomfortable space. So you want to get out of it as soon as possible, and when you want to get out of the problem space, we tend to come into assumptions, and when we do those assumptions, some of our biases play in. When these biases are actually seen in our design and we take it out and test it with people, we see that it is actually very unempathetic and it doesn't really solve anything. And it was just for us to come out of our own discomfort that the problem space was giving us. Being really reflective and iterative about how we approach problems and getting a clearer view of what is happening and who is involved and what we are doing, will it actually benefit them? So getting a clearer idea and spending more time in the problem space, that has been really challenging. And you asked us where it leaves us. So if I understand that question correctly, it leaves us with a lot of internal criticism and weird amount of self-doubt, and there are a lot of aha moments, but also a lot of maybe I'm doing the wrong things. It's a very imbalanced space to be in, but it's also fun because that's how it's.
Okay. Can something that you create ever be complete? Or there's
I
always
don't
something to do?
I don't think so. And that is something I've also been exploring a lot recently, since even in my internship and the current work that I'm doing. They sort of taught me that design is more of a continuum, or it's like a continuous process. So you can't have a problem, come up with a solution, and then implement that solution and be done with it. You need to go back and you need to bring things back to the drawing board and reimagine, and then go back and involve more people. So I think design is a very time consuming and a very iterative process, and it takes a lot of effort, and that effort is also sort of rewarding and fun to put in. That's how I enjoy design a lot.
Nice, Abhiram. Thank you. Vismaya, would you like to build on what Abhiram has just said? How would you like to present your experiences while you've been creating products?
Adding on to what Abhiram said about us being unempathetic because of our assumptions and our biases when we are trying to cater to the user, is that sometimes we might think of it more as a puzzle, as in A would require so and so number of interventions because we see that it's missing and it seems to trouble them. But what I've realized that in reality, sometimes they don't need it because they're used to a certain lifestyle, they're used to a certain habit. And sometimes we tend to forget those tangents because we're so focused on seeing what's missing or what is needed. And I think making that distinction is something that I've learned the hard way, because a lot of my projects, I would just try to fill in the missing pieces without realizing that sometimes that piece wasn't even meant to be there. We needed a completely different piece. That was another learning that I just remember from what Abhiram spoke.
Ria, how would you like to continue on this topic?
Since you talked about human behavior, I've been over the past year interning as a behavioral design researcher. So for me to look at any problem now, any situation that I'm in, like Abhiram mentioned, being in that uncomfortable problem space, it just, you grow to start liking that uncertainty, because every time you hit a wall, you look at another aspect that you've tried in some other cycle, some other workshop, some other studio, and you're like, what if I trying doing that here, and what happens? And I think that as I'm really starting to growing to like it, and then also learning about biases and human behavior and how it is a complete science that goes behind these interventions. It is very interesting for me also now to have an added aspect of looking, and also since I am a human-centered designer, it is very interesting to look at the target audience that I'm working with and sort of like understand their perceived biases and their behavior and their interaction with, say, any product that I would be working with. When you were asking this question, one thing that kept coming in my mind is one of my professors in first year said, you never stop being a designer. Like Abhiram said, it's like a continuous process. Even after school, you are a designer. So it sort of becomes a part of who you are, and you keep noticing things. And walking around, I would notice random things that I find intriguing, whether it be like the typography of something or a solution that they have found for some problem, which then I might just end up using somewhere else. From my experience, you start growing as a designer in that aspect.
Thanks, Ria. Janavi, what's your perspective?
All three of them have encapsulated what it is at large. Few things to add is to what Ria mentioned, that you walk and you just notice things randomly now. Even if I'm walking on the street and I see someone quarrel, or there's an accident, for example, or anything that is happening on the road, it just comes to my mind of what can be done, how can this problem be solved. And it's not just about products or services. It's also in my group, for example. If in my friend circle there's a fight, or there's a misunderstanding, for example, I always approach it like a designer now, because there's a process, right, of a design thinking process. You do your research and there's ideation, whatever. But before the research, there's also biases and assumptions. So you map out your biases. If I'm trying to solve a fight between my friends, I always come from a background. I'm thinking, okay, these are my biases and assumptions. Maybe let's put it aside and then let do some research and then you build on it. And I've tried to bring all of my understanding in these 3 years into my daily life. And I don't think I can ever go back to normal. So yeah, that was one point. Also, the fact that I personally feel like there's not always a need for a new intervention. We were taught this in our first year because, oh, we're new design students and, oh, we want to solve everything, we want to help the world. But our professors very readily pointed out to us that there's not always need for interventions because people are set in their own lives. And you need to understand where they're coming from. You need to be very empathetic in order to just get into their lives. You need to understand where they're coming from, what is their background, because not everyone is the same. So here comes the whole talk about behavioral psychology and all of that. So yeah, it's a continuous process, and we're learning that here.
Nice, Janvi. In fact, I wanted to ask you, how successful have you really been in terms of preventing fights from escalating? I think that would be a very interesting tip.
I've been very good with it because my friends nowadays, if they're having a quarrel or anything, I'm the first one they call. I understand where both the parties are coming from, and I tend to have a very diplomatic language when I speak. So they understand me better. I know that this person understands this language. I know this person understands that language. And I try to interact with them in that way. And all of this has come because of how my professors have pushed me to do user research. I'm going to the market. For example, yesterday I went out to eat momos and I was just talking to the momo wale bhaiya, talking to him about his cart and when he opens and how are the rush hours and what does he think could be better. I've tried to accomplish that using this whole design thinking journey of mine.
That's nice. Maybe a career as a diplomat, perhaps. Who knows, isn't it?
Maybe. Very open to everything after Srishti.
So, with a couple of things that you all said as part of your introductions, I just wanted to circle back on a couple of those things and wanted to start with Ria. You constantly have mentioned research,
Yeah.
and it looks like that is something that holds your attention and has in some way been part of your design learning experience. Why do you look to research? And the reason I'm asking this question is based on what I know and what my experiences have been. Design is a lot about observation, interaction, curiosity, and just being aware of all that is going on around you, that you take in and churn inside and create something. Why does research play such a strong role in your approach to design and your academic pursuit in design?
I think I have like a few parts to this answer. But I think in Srishti, and it's generally even as a designer, what you typically do is do a secondary research and a primary research. And it's just since my first year, it's been so interesting to. First of all, it's very recommended that you do secondary and primary research because of the importance that they play, like the role they play in your anything that you want to create or improve any problem. The importance of knowing what already exists